Dare to enter Crow's Quill's books, where tales of forgotten realms and fearless souls come alive. Today's journey, Operation DarkStar, Chapter 39, by Mark Lindsay. Will you uncover the truth hidden in the shadows? Chapter 39. He hadn't felt this tense in a long while. Saul continued to scan their surroundings. Everything was happening so fast. So much new information to take in. So much on the line. So much to lose. "How much longer do we wait?" Sarah asked from behind. "Not much longer. You know Scott won't keep us waiting. He doesn't know how to fail," Saul said. Sarah nodded. "I just don't like us sitting out here. Exposed," Sarah replied. "Not much longer," Saul whispered. 3 flashes of red light in the distance alerted Saul and the others that Scott was approaching. Everyone relaxed visibly as the figures walked quickly up the hill, raised eyebrows of concern when they realized that only 2 had arrived. "Where's Lee?" Cooper growled as he grabbed a handful of Tarnay's jacket. The big Maori was clearly not happy with their current course, not happy with the question, and not happy with being manhandled. He shrugged the larger man away. "Keep your hands off of me," Tarnay snarled. The bigger man was getting ready to physically extract the information he wanted when Scott came up beside him and slapped something small onto the side of his arm. Taken aback, he held it out. Squinting in the dark, he recognized it straight away. A patch with 3 intersecting lightning bolts, the patch of a ranger. "We got the explosives. Lee fell in the process, honorably and in battle. There was nothing we could have done to prevent it," Scott insisted. In the background, Gates wept quietly. It was a desperate, uncomfortable sound that everyone present did their best to try and ignore. "So you say?" Cooper replied heatedly, although his anger was already starting to fail. "You guys came to us. If we're going to pull this off, we need all hands on deck. Don't question the loyalty or courage of my team again," Saul said. The other man appeared almost twice the size of the ex-detective, but there was something in the older man's demeanor. A sense of fire and integrity that couldn't be denied. Cooper took a deep breath, letting the rage of a dying friend dim. "Lee. He was a good man. He was my friend," Cooper said. They all knew the moment had passed. "Let's not waste his sacrifice then," Rob said, rather stiff-lipped. Scott stared out from the top of the hill. From what he could see, there was no movement in and around the facility. "It almost appears too quiet, although that could just be my paranoia," Scott mumbled. They moved down the hill in a tight arrowhead formation, with Apache and Rob taking the lead. A light wind rustled over the sparse landscape. No other sound could be detected. The museum was shaped like a large cross, water features surrounding the building on all sides. Large trees chosen for their immense size and their flowering beauty scattered the landscape, although they hadn't shown their magnificence in 8 years. They were careful as they descended, using the wide-reaching branches of the trees as camouflage from anything that may be watching. They approached the surrounding moat and stopped when they reached its edge. Water blacker than the eternal night sky greeted them. Bam Bam quickly checked the water and reluctantly nodded. "I think it's clear, but that's not saying much," Bam Bam whispered. "Over there," Rob pointed out. A narrow concrete bridge that was little more than a footpath. Careful to keep watch, they made their way across, one at a time. The ex-firefighter was the last to cross. He lingered halfway, inspecting the water, despite not being able to see within its murky depths. He felt certain that something hideous and malignant was watching them closely. The entry into the museum was 2 giant glass doors that had stood nearly 20 feet in height. Now laid open, the ground littered in thick shards, the only evidence that it had ever existed. Their combined footfalls crunched noisily as they crossed into the facility. The moment they entered the museum, Booth took control, leading them through the natural history exhibit. Corridors filled with stuffed animals, arranged in poses in their natural habitats. Everything from jungles to deserts. Their glass eyes staring back accusingly as they passed. The teenaged girl sidled up beside the ex-paramedic. "I've got a really bad feeling about this," Paige said, her body shuddering slightly at the exhibit of a pack of wolves in a forest setting. "Truth be told, I've never been fond of these sorts of things. I've probably only been to the museum twice before. Seeing the animals stuffed and mounted, it just seemed wrong," Sarah mused. "Dumb animals," Apache chuckled. Sarah glared, then punched him hard on the shoulder. "Now that we're the hunted, does that make us any dumber?" Paige asked. "Speak for yourself, Shorty. I've never been the hunted," Apache said proudly. Sarah rolled her eyes and made a loose fist with her hand, jerked it back and forward. Paige choked back a giggle. The place seemed relatively untouched. Saul theorized that with no one in the building on the night of the portals, the creatures were not drawn to attack, and survivors wouldn't have seen the facility as having anything of use to help them through Armageddon. "I know what you're thinking," Scott said. "Is that so?" "Enlighten me," Saul replied. "You're thinking that the one thing that could have saved the world was sitting right under our nose, and that it's only been revealed to us on the cusp of losing everything," Scott said. "Really? I was thinking all that. You give me too much credit, old friend. I was actually thinking how tired my knees feel and how I'd like a whiskey right now," Saul replied. "Liar," Scott grinned. "A really good whiskey, a single malt, at least 15 years, Saul mused. "If we pull this off, I'll find you a crate," Scott said. "If," Saul replied, growing silent. "Down there," Booth said, pointing to a staff access door, which led into a barren corridor. They followed the concrete tunnel and passed various subsections of the museum. Areas where the real work behind the facility took place. Dr. Booth didn't even look twice as they made their way carefully towards their intended destination, a staircase and elevator with a red P above it. "Private." "This is it," Booth said. Rob pulled a small electronic device from his backpack, and with Cooper's assistance, they attached cables directly into the electronic lock. It immediately lit up. The numerical LED display, flickering through various sequences in a blur of red light, it turned green, the lock clicking loudly open. With no power in the building, the group was forced to take the stairs. Standing at the edge and peering down, Jared could just make out how far it led and held up 4 fingers. Why the security? Why did they feel the need to place it all the way down there? Bam Bam asked. The Wagner Institute isn't the only organization to use the security holdings of the museum. There is a no questions asked with what is stored down in the vaults. However, the fees are extremely expensive, Booth said. "Which means better exhibits," Sarah added. "Exactly," Booth replied. Cooper and Tarnay led the team slowly down into the dark bowels of the museum. They traveled the 4 flights of stairs down in silence. The deeper they traveled, the darker their surroundings. Even the beams of their torches had trouble cutting through the thick black of the museum depths. "Under the ground. This will be our tomb," Gates said, his voice echoing eerily in the man-made cavern. "Shut your fucking mouth, Toad. I warned you before," Bam Bam growled, turning his torch on the scientist, then freezing. "What the fuck is that?" he added. They all turned their torches in Gates's direction. Everyone had been so focused on what was at the bottom of the staircase that they had completely missed the stairs themselves. Thick black tendrils were coming out of the walls around them, coiling down. They were wrapped and entwined amongst the banisters and railings. "Nobody do anything," Scott ordered, suppressing his own urges to start firing wildly at the tentacle-like objects. "He's right. They're not attacking," Booth confirmed. "And I'm not waiting until it does," Apache snarled, stepping forward, ready to fire. "God damn it, Jordan. Not everything is a do-or-die scenario. For once, just shut up and listen," Saul said wearily. Apache grunted, but held his ground, his weapon still poised for combat. "Warm and alive," Gates said casually, running his hand along one of the black tentacle-like objects. "Don't do that," Scott warned. Then he saw it. The appendage quivered under the scientist's touch. "Get him away from it?" Sarah said to Booth, who carefully tugged on her chain, pulling Gates away from the side of the stairs where the thing appeared heavily. Everyone's eyes were fixated on the railing, waiting for it to suddenly become hostile. The tension in the air was thick, everyone thinking the same thing. What do we do now? "Booth, keep control of Gates. Don't let him near those things. We keep moving. Nothing's changed. We still have a job to do," Scott instructed. No one spoke. They all moved with even more caution, being careful to stay away from the black tendrils, which the further down they went covered the ground like veins in flesh. They bubbled within and on top and below the concrete carelessly, but alive. "Fuck this shit," Tarnay hissed, narrowly missing one laying strewn across the last set of stairs. With Cooper and Jared's aid, they were all able to clear it as they touched down on the final landing. They entered a corridor, concrete and sterile. The dust and dirt of the world above not yet infiltrated this part of the museum. The corridor was at least 50 meters long, 10 large steel doors on either side, each one resembling a bank vault entry. They all spread out. Besides each door was a brass slot with a laminated placard. "Empty," Tarnay called out. "I have GOW, Saul said. "T-Pagan," Rob said. Apache burst out laughing. "Hey, Bam Bam, I've got D. DeLuca," Apache said, still laughing. "Are you serious?" "Who's DeLuca?" Cooper asked. "That would be Don DeLuca, head of the New York crime family," Saul interjected. "You know your criminals?" Apache said, impressed. The former detective shrugged. "I have Reinhardt and Winter," Bam Bam said. "Perigord Library," Page chimed in. Jared tapped his axe against one of the doors. It sounded loudly like an ancient gong. Page dashed to his side. "We have a winner," Page said with a huge, youthful smile. They quickly made their way to the pair, nearly 2/3 of the way down. "This is the one," Rob reiterated as Scott started to set up his equipment. "This is VX-200, also known as Black Sun," Scott said, pulling out a large gray brick from his backpack. "It's very similar to C4 in how it's used," Scott added. He was pulling off small chucks in his hands, its composition much like Play-Doh. The ex-Delta soldier started rolling the pieces between his palms, creating long strings, which he stuck in and around the hinges of the vault door, finally fixing it to the timer and igniter. "I've never used this stuff personally, but from what I've read, the explosion should be small, but the heat it generates will be short and intense," Scott informed the group. On the digital display, he punched in 030. It immediately started to count down. 27. "Head back towards the stairs," Scott instructed. 23. "If I'm wrong, and it brings down the ceiling, I want us on the exit side of the corridor." 17. They all scrambled towards the exit and took cover. 9. They all watched and waited. 2. 1. Boom. The explosion rocked the corridor. Blinding white light from the intense heat seared through solid steel. The group shielded the eyes and faces from intense glare and debris. The shockwave sent vibrations through the earth. Above ground, the mighty trees that circled the facility stirred. After the cloud of dust had settled, they peered up from the ground towards the vault door, which was still sitting in place. "You have got to be shitting me," Sarah grunted, slapping the heavy dust from her clothes. "We'll try again," Scott said with a frown. "No need," Cooper said as he pushed past. The giant stood facing the vault door, rubbing his hand through the hair on his beard as he studied the damage caused by the explosive. "The hinge is cactus. The only thing holding this thing in place is its sheer size," Cooper said matter of fact. Grasping the handle on the door with both hands, he tensed and pulled with all of his might. The thick steel groaned but refused to budge. Taking a deep breath, he tried again with similar luck. He was about to try again when a second pair of hands joined him on the door. Jared had placed his axe against the wall and was preparing to assist. "On 3, Cooper said and counted. Both men pulled. The door strained and groaned, barely moving. They were quickly joined by Tarnay and Apache, then finally Rob. The steel of the door started to squeak as it was slowly moved from its frame. "It's going to fall," Saul warned, just as the door dropped from its mounted position and toppled outward and landed hard on the concrete floor with an almighty boom. Paige and Scott were the first to enter, followed quickly by Sarah and Jared. The air was stale. Paige wrinkled her nose in disgust and coughed. "Suck it up," Scott said, scanning the room for a threat. The X-Delta taking nothing for granted. The interior of the vault was nothing special. Industrial shelving lined the walls. They were loaded with all manner of tech gadgetry. "Bam, bam! Can you get in here and find the doohickey?" Scott called out. The biker wasted no time in his search. "Booth, would there be anything else of use in here? It seems a waste to come all this way, just for one component," Saul said. The female scientist entered with Gates on his chain. She appeared interested in a shelf near the rear of the vault. It was laden with books. "I've never been in this room, apart from knowing about some of the components needed for the experiment." "Everything in here is news to me, Detective," Booth said, just as something on the shelf caught her eye. She removed a thick book and chuckled when she glanced at the back cover. "What is it?" Saul asked. "Black Holes, Wormholes, and the Quantum Variant. By Dr. Samuel Gates," Booth said, and pointed to the picture on the back of the book. It was an author photo. Gates was looking neatly groomed in skivvy and tweed jacket. The photo was black and white. The man in it no longer existed. "Holy shit," Apache chuckled. "You weren't joking, were you?" Tarnay agreed. "What's this supposed to be?" Sarah asked. Booth looked up from her book to see the ex-paramedic standing before something large mounted to the wall, a heavy canvas sheet covering it. "That's unusual," Booth said, intrigued. She joined the other woman by the wall. Just as Sarah was pulling the canvas off, it fell to the floor, revealing a large chunk of flat rock. On its surface, a crude drawing depicting hellish-looking creatures, and in the center, a large black hole with what appeared to be giant clawed hands trying to escape. Strange writing framed the picture. "What does it say?" Rob asked from behind. "I don't know. It looks like ancient Sumerian, if I was to guess," Booth replied. "It looks like a cave painting," Sarah said, taking a picture of it with a small camera. "If it is Sumerian, it could be as old as 4100 BC, Booth said. "It clearly represents what's happening here. Portals and demons," Paige said, feeling a shiver of horror travel down her spine. That may be true, but what the fuck is that thing supposed to be? Apache asked, pointing to the giant set of taloned hands emerging from the darkness. Whatever it is, I just hope that it's the artist's imagination and nothing else, Rob grunted. I've got it, Bam Bam called out, now holding a small box in his hands. Are you sure? I don't want to have to come back if it's the wrong component, Booth asked. I've double-checked the shelves. It's the only piece of tech that matched your description. If I'm wrong, then we're shit out of luck, Bam Bam replied. We'll all accept your judgment, Saul agreed. Good, then let's get, Scott started. We've got movement, people, Cooper announced. The big man had been standing guard at the door to the vault when he spied something flicker near the stairwell. There was still plenty of dust in the air, so he hadn't been sure at first. But the flicker was soon joined by other activity. It was low, as if it were crawling. What is it? Scott said from behind, the ex-Delta peering over the sights of his assault rifle. I'm not sure. It's near the stairs. I don't think it's alone, Cooper replied. They watched carefully, in silence, their eyes strained for even the smallest sign of movement. A blur in the dust-filled air, low to the ground. It was edging its way down the corridor towards them. Scott felt a sinking feeling in his stomach. I think I know what it is, he hissed through clenched teeth. Cooper remained silent, his own imagination filling in the blanks. It sounded like something being dragged across the concrete floor. Everyone was now out in the corridor, their weapons raised. The air was still thick from the explosion, visibility heavily obscured. The noise from the stairs intensified. Don't go auto unless completely necessary. Single shot only. Scott stopped mid-sentence as the black tendrils they had seen early, when descending the stairs, raced towards them like snakes. Scott was the first to fire, but not the last. The others within the group followed quickly. The thin targets were not so easy to hit. Sightless they slithered, covering the distance towards their prey in seconds. Rounds from gunfire struck the advancing tendrils. However, there were dozens more ready and eager to take their place. "Ah!" Paige screamed out as one of the tentacle-like appendages coiled around her ankle and pulled the teenager from her feet. She had no sooner hit the ground when she found herself being pulled towards the staircase. "Help me!" Paige cried out for help. Jared sprung to life, leaping forward and bringing down his great axe, severing the tendril, inches from her foot. The big ex-firefighter was quick to snatch the girl from the ground as the severed tentacle whipped back and forth, spurting black blood. As it retracted, others advanced. Jared was quick to push Paige towards the others as he swung his axe. Saul quickly joined him, taking a knee and firing his weapon at the advancing sea of writhing black serpents. "We need another way out of here now," Saul demanded. He was now joined by Rob and Tarnay. Scott's instruction to conserve ammunition, now completely ignored, as they were doing everything within their power to keep the creatures from getting to them. "What are they?" Cooper asked. The trees, Gates said gleefully. "What the fuck is he babbling about?" Bam Bam growled. "The root system from the trees above. I don't know how, and I don't know why. Maybe a mutation, maybe something else. That's what's attacking us now," Booth replied. "Great. Did anyone think to bring any weed killer?" Apache grunted, letting loose a burst from his own assault rifle. "Back this way," Sarah called out. She had made her way to the far end of the corridor. She was pointing to a blind spot on the wall. Scott's frustration was evident. They were stuck nearly 100 meters below the ground, in a tunnel with no apparent exit. Their only way out blocked by the roots from possessed trees. Not seeing what Sarah could, he trusted the woman's judgment. "Pull back," Scott yelled. "What the hell? Are you fucking serious?" Apache asked, then seeing Scott's expression. "To where?" Again, Scott's expression said it all. The ex-biker cursed inwardly. As a group, they slowly made their way back to where Sarah was positioned, the ex-paramedic kneeling by the side of the wall. As they got closer, they could see a Leatherman tool in her hand, as she busily was removing screws from a large grilled vent fastened to the side wall. With the help of Tarnay, the pair pried it open beyond vast darkness. "No way. I know what you're thinking. No fucking way," Apache stated. "I have to agree with my boy. If those things are tree roots, then I'm not keen on facing anything else inside the walls," Bam Bam agreed. "Then you can stay here and introduce yourself to the root, snake, whatever's," Sarah offered, as she shined the torch attached to her rifle into the gaping hole in the wall. "Smell you later?" Sarah shrugged and leapt in. Tarnay followed immediately. They had all now retreated back near the vent, firing into the mass of writhing tendrils. "Hey, I want to help," Paige protested as Jared pushed her past everyone and into the hole, just before he too joined her inside. "I think the vote is in. Let's bug out," Saul said, grabbing Bam Bam by the shoulder and pushing him in. "We need you and that thing you grabbed," Saul added before following the biker in. They all lowered themselves inside, one at a time, Apache being the last, spraying his assault rifle at the oncoming menace before disappearing with the others. Hunched over, they shuffled quickly through the shaft system, their combined lights hitting the reflective surfaces of the shaft, making it easier to move. Scott was able to maneuver himself around until he was beside Sarah. "A big ask, but do you have any idea where we are?" Scott asked. Still moving, Sarah thought the question over. "About 100 meters underground," Sarah replied. "That's what I thought," Scott grumbled. They made several more turns, the X-Delta conscious of the noises coming behind them, with the occasional sound of gunfire, indicating that the tendrils were now actively pursuing them into the tunnel. "This is going to come to an end soon. I don't want to be taking our last stand in this crawl space. / coffin. We need to be heading up," Scott said, pointing in that direction. "Agreed. The next shaft that leads vertically." "I'm taking it, but it's not going to be easy," Sarah said. "Nothing ever is," Scott said with a forced grin. "I'll let everyone know the plan," Scott added before disappearing back down the line. This entire situation was leaving him nauseous. The idea that they were so cut off from topside, the fate of everyone in the tunnel, the people back at the sanctuary, and what was left of humanity now depending on him, in a foolhardy and reckless mission that may or may not be completely bullshit, was messing with his fundamental core beliefs in the structure of the universe. He was nearly at the back, flashes of light indicating that the rear guard were engaged in intense combat. Cooper and Apache were taking turns firing into the snake-like tendrils, blasting them into bloody black pulp as they withdrew only to be replaced by others. Scott watched on in dreaded fascination. "Haven't you killed them all by now?" Scott called out. "You're welcome to take over if you want," Cooper offered. "Actually, that's what I'm here for," Scott said, and showed them a small brick of black sun, a timer attached to it. "Great! Let's set it and blow that nasty fucker up," Apache said happily, momentarily distracted. They didn't see the oversized black tentacle lash out with full force at them, knocking the trio down the narrow tunnel, the explosive falling out of Scott's grip and skidding across the metal surface. The tentacle whipped forward to strike the X-delta, only for it to stop mere inches from his surprised face, its progress halted by the meaty hand of Cooper, who held it tightly in his grip. "You little piece of shit," Cooper hissed, squeezing the appendage in one hand, and with the other he severed the black flesh with a single chop from a vicious steel blade that looked half machete, half axe. The tendril flip-flopped in his hand before retreating out of sight. "Shit," Scott said in relief, his eyes suddenly going wide. "God damn it," he added through clenched teeth as he scrambled on his hands and knees towards the fallen explosive. "Holy shit, we're bloody lucky that thing didn't go off on us," Apache muttered. "Don't talk to me about luck," Scott cursed. "Hey, those tentacles, roots, or whatever those things are, they're gone," Cooper said, partly concerned, partly relieved. The other two men stopped and stared down into the darkness. It was quiet. Too quiet. They waited and watched, the rest of the team still moving forward, eyes scanning the darkness for the slightest signs of movement. Then they heard it, the metal of the shaft groaning. "That can't be fucking good," Apache grunted. "You might want to get that bomb ready," he added. "About that," Scott replied. "What's holding them up?" Sarah asked, her mind going through every worst-case scenario imaginable. "I'm sure they're right behind us with a funny story to tell," Tarnay replied, his eyes scanning the tunnel ahead. "If you're going to lie to me, can you at least try and put some effort into it?" Sarah grumbled. "Do you want my scouting ability? Or do you want me to tell the truth?" "I'm afraid I can't do both," Tarnay admitted. "You're a fun date, Saul. I think you might need to go and check on the others," Sarah called out. "On it," the ex-detective called back, his torchlight disappearing down the tunnel. "About what?" Apache said testily. They were still standing, half-crouched in the tunnel, the sounds of metal being wrenched and torn getting louder by the second. The timer was damaged. It's stuck on a 3-second countdown. It's risky to use. "Too risky," Scott fumed. They all went quiet as they thought this over, broken by the former berserker. "Risky? Shit, that's my middle name," Apache chuckled. "Be serious," Scott insisted. "I am," Apache replied angrily, but this faded immediately. "Look, brother, I got this. The nasty shows its face or whatever. I set the timer, throw it, and skedaddle out. Beast goes boom. I lose some hair on my ass. We get out and finish this," Apache said. Scott chuckled his response. "Skydaddle, really," Scott said. "Hey, it's a word and I'm not ashamed to use it. I've also been known to use kafuddle and bamboozle on occasion." Apache shrugged. Scott still looked dubious. "He won't be alone," Cooper insisted. In that moment, Scott made a decision. "Okay, you two, but no heroics. You've got a minute. Tops. If the monster doesn't show, make your way back to the rest of the group. If it decides to show its ugly face, send it to hell." "Understand," Scott instructed. "Understood, boss man," Apache said. Cooper nodded as well. "Good. I'll see you soon," Scott said, handing over the explosive, indicating the procedure they needed to make it detonate, then heading off to warn the others of their plan. That seals today's tale in shadows. We hope Operation DarkStar has drawn you deeper into its enigma. Return soon to Crow's Quill's books, where the next chapter awaits, whispering secrets yet untold.